So this next story is the same kind of story, and probably also for a Clarion West donated. And I need to locate the story. Okay. And the donors for this story was somebody else who wanted his cat in it, and my friend Bob White, who is here with us, Professor Bob. And I think you'll learn as much as you need to know about both Bob and the cat from the story. And this is Bob is the co-writer of this story. We didn't so much as write it together as we wrote it serially. And I think you can tell me whether you think it works or not. The title is The Story So Far by Eileen Gunn and Bob White. 1. The Green Room. When Bob awoke, he was still in the green room, a dismal place with pale green walls and a linoleum floor with a pattern that looked like confetti vomit. Along the periphery of the room, bolted to the floor, were uncomfortable molded seats of orange plastic, like dreadful little people cups. A tired old guy with a string mop wiped down the floor near the men's room, and a few disreputable characters dozed in the seats. How long had he been here? It seemed like years. He looked around. Was the cat, Otto, still there? He checked every chair. No cat. He groaned. Oh no. But, oh, there he was, on top of the phantom machine. Phew. Bob dreaded waking up one day and discovering that big orange Tom was gone. Not that Otto was such a great companion, but if the cat got a gig and he didn't, the green room would really be intolerable. Otto was only the beginning of his worries, though. What about the story? He didn't have stage fright, he was sure. He never had stage fright. He was what he was, a tall man with a Gandalf beard and a devil-may-care attitude. But what kind of stories were there for filmmakers who looked like Gandalf and dressed like Dumbledore? Of course, it was probably just a walk-on, no big deal, maybe a few lines of dialogue. Nobody needed to know he was a filmmaker or even that he was the most cliché-haunted character, a university professor. Perhaps in this story, he would be a starship captain. In your dreams, Bob, he thought. Maybe he would be a cat, and maybe Otto would be a starship captain. My only line would be, meow. That's just the sort of thing that would amuse the author. No, 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 she wouldn't do that to me. Eileen wouldn't do that. 2. The writer's desk. 2:00 in the morning. The dishes were done, the furniture was dusted, the rugs were beaten. It was too dark to wash the windows. Time to write. The writer had mapped the story in her head the night before. The plot was perfect, scientifically plausible, well-paced, and taut as a strung bow. But she hadn't written anything down, and now she couldn't remember where she was going with it. The technology was wonky, and the whole thing now seemed murky and ill-conceived. She had the characters, Otto and Bob. She could see Otto pretty clearly, a macho bruiser, burly, with an orange beard, German football muscle, the kind of guy who pushes the door open with his shoulder when he enters a room, super confident, can fall asleep anywhere. That would do for Otto. You could drop him into pretty much any story, and he would make sense. But what about Bob White? Should he wear his Dumbledore robe? Nah. Surely his students would recognize him, but more conventional readers wouldn't get the joke. They'd expect a fantasy, something with sparkly unicorns and unpredictable magic spells. Gotta move against the cliches here, Gunn. Well, could he be a starship captain? In a story about asteroid mining that was due a month ago? Really? I don't think so. He can't be an asteroid miner either. Though maybe if he was an AI? Nope, nope, nope. Not putting a debonair city guy like Bob out on an asteroid, even as an AI. Though that might be a job for Otto. Forget about Otto. Otto is the kind of character who can be in any story. Bob White can only be in a story that values both tradition and eccentricity. A story that respects both a chilled seafood platter and a 60-second public service spot featuring giant pink bunnies. Who could be convinced to write such a story? She hung her head in shame. She knew the answer. Part 3. The Phantom Machine. Atop the Phantom Machine, dead Otto lay dreaming, aware of everything that transpired. He was waiting for the explosion. When it came, he awoke, opened his great green eyes, and meowed. A huge fireball had erupted into the waiting room. Otto transformed instantly and leaped into action, throwing his heat-proof cape over the room's cowering inhabitants. Growing large as a woolly mammoth, he swooped up the cape full of men and carried it outside the bus station. Dumped unceremoniously by the supernatural force that had lifted them, they stood on the pavement, 5 slightly singed men, coughing and blinking and wondering what had just happened. Otto's cape conferred invisibility, at least upon him, and he looked at each of the men over in turn. 4 generic, undistinguished, slightly shabby, everyday, everyman types, and one, wait a minute, the 5th man was changing shape right before his eyes, assuming the form of, yes, the cat's nemesis, the monstrous polymath Bob White, standing there in full regalia. The man had tracked him this far, but now he appeared baffled. Perhaps the explosion had disrupted his evil train of thought. Eileen was wrong about this character. His genial wit masked the cleverest criminal mastermind. Otto gave brief consideration to the possible causes of the explosion, but when a cat is aware of all time, all that has happened, all that will happen, it becomes difficult to sort out sort out the causality of any one event. Could Bob White himself have triggered the explosion? But why would he try to blow himself up? Incompetence in the plan of so brilliant a malfeasance seemed unlikely. No, the answer was simple. He, Otto, had dreamed the wrong story. He would try again, but the characters Bob White and Eileen Gunn were interestingly flawed. I will keep them, Otto thought. Part 4. The Unwritten Story. Sorry. I contributed to this charitable cause, and as a result, I was granted a promise that I would appear as a character in one of this author's stories. I had appeared as a character in stories before. By performing in a few movies, I had played characters, and I imagined they were me in stories, or a fictional me in stories. So now I waited to be appearing in a story. As I thought about it, being in an unwritten story was like being a character waiting. Until the story was written, the character, I, existed outside of time. Anything was possible. In my mind, a story had begun of the character in the unwritten story. So now there were 2 stories, waiting for the unwritten story and the unwritten story itself. As time went by, I began to be afraid. As soon as the unwritten story was written, the waiting character would cease to exist. I would die. As the story was being written, the character would begin to disappear. How might that happen? Would I be losing memory and function? I was tempted to tell the writer about my fears. As long as I was the character in the unwritten story, I was infinite possibilities. Wait, have I just written a story? The end. Take a bow, Bob.